Welcome everyone to the Bodybuilding Dietitians podcast. Thanks for joining us for another episode. We've had a great streak of all of us on the podcast. So myself, we've got Tiara here as well. We've got Damien, and we're looking forward to diving into a number of different topics. So again, we've asked some questions on the Bodybuilding Dietitians Instagram. So if you're not following along on Instagram, please feel free to give us a follow. And we usually put up question boxes every week or every 2 weeks. We're in a very fortunate position, and we're grateful where we do get quite a few questions. So we're not going to necessarily get through all questions all the time, but if you persevere and keep asking your question, then who knows, you might get answered one day. And we try to sort of group it per theme. So one of the major themes today, actually, I'm not going to say it. People can find out what the themes are. They can continue listening. So we'll jump into this first question. And it says, is eating red meat every day bad for bowel health? I love prepping beef and rice every day. So I'll definitely speak to this a little bit, and then we can do a bit of a round table and get Tiara and Damien's opinion as well. So I think, as in usual fashion, like, I'll start off with those two words, it depends. And there is more semantics and more nuance associated with the answer to this question. So I would say the real dependence is where you're getting that source of red meat from. There are potentially sources of red meat, or there are sources of red meat which can cause negative implications on gut health and potentially increase your risk of colon cancer or other sort of gut-related disorders. And what I'm mainly talking about here is processed meats. So a good example of that is deli meat. So if you're having things like roast beef at the deli that's been used nitrates and phosphates in order to prepare that, and it's cured, there is a negative association with someone's gut health. And in Australia, they've actually listed processed meats on the Cancer Council as a carcinogen, a grade 1 carcinogen. So I feel quite comfortable saying do your best to avoid deli meats. It's not something that I say on the same level as like smoking or alcohol, but I do say where possible, just reduce your intake of deli meat, since there is a negative implication on gut health and around the kind of strain of different bacteria in the gut, which isn't great. But there are also those other aspects around sort of carcinogen levels too. So that would be one point that I'd start off with here.
And sorry to break anyone's hearts, but it's not just your salami and your Twiggy sticks and your beef silver side that you would be getting at the deli. But believe it or not, it actually includes things like your smoked salmon, right? We know that a lot of people, they love getting those smoked salmon fillets from the deli, or, the pre-packets that are in the refrigerated portion of the grocery store. But even those, they are heavily processed, and that's actually, kind of clumped in there with, those sort of grade 1 carcinogens, unfortunately, too. So it's not just red meat, guys. How that meat is processed, whether that is from a seafood source, whether that's red meat, whether that's a white meat, you name it. But that's also why it's really important to not just say, okay, red meat in general, but like you were saying there, Jack, it's whether or not, like, the degree of processing. So when we actually take red meat and say, okay, what if this is actually a really great cut of meat that is from, a lean source of beef, or even something like lamb, or here in Australia, good old OG listeners of TBD would know that Jack and I love getting amongst some kangaroo. And I'm curious, Damien, are you on that roux train as well?
It's funny you say that, because I was with Jack recently and he was having kangaroo, and I actually made the comment that I'd never tried kangaroo before, and it kind of prompted me one day in the supermarket, walking around, actually saw some kangaroo on sale. So I thought, why not? I'm having burgers tonight. There's kangaroo burger patties there. Let's give it a go. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And even, I guess, one from a taste perspective, but I guess nutritionally as well, it's quite a lean cut. And I guess that's where I'd come at this as well. Like, sure, like the evidence showing, I guess the increased amounts of red meats in those sorts of processed foods can definitely, have those kind of, health implications if consumed in high amounts. But I guess the listeners may want to know, okay, well, if I still want to have these sorts of products, what's the best way of still consuming them? And it is consuming, I guess, more leaner cuts, so you can get, I I guess, fattier cuts of red meat. Like if you're looking in the supermarket, you might see multiple different levels of, a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. What do these sorts of levels kind of mean, and what do these ratings mean? And it's about choosing, I guess, more of the leaner sources of these sorts of cuts of meat, which means that there's less fat, less saturated fats within these products. So if you are going to consume these sorts of foods in those moderate amounts, it would be going for opting the more leaner cuts of meat, which may be a little bit more expensive, but health-wise, it's definitely going to be more advantageous to consume those sorts of cuts of meat.
And ideally the ones that are minimally processed. And Damien, here I'm not like, oh gosh, who's this guy eating the kangaroo burgers or like those kangaroo sausages? Because of course they undergo a more heavily degree of processing compared to something like the kangaroo mince or like the kangaroo steaks, etc., etc. But it's definitely not quite on that level of something like a salami stick. But if we actually look at red meat in itself, it is just so remarkably nutritious. If you have a lean cut of kangaroo or beef, or if you're over in North America and you're eating something like venison or bison or whatever it may be, it is just not just a great source of high biological value protein, but you have, of course, the iron, you have selenium, you have zinc, you have a plethora of B vitamins, including vitamin B12. So red meat is actually so remarkably nutritious, and it has so many essential micronutrients in it that, if you aren't eating it otherwise, sometimes it can be very difficult to actually obtain enough of those essential micronutrients from other food sources, namely iron. So yeah, some people often run into issues of being iron deficient, having low ferritin levels if they don't have adequate amounts of red meat in their diet. But it really does depend on the exact source that you are obtaining it from.
Yeah, I think we should maybe address like, where does the myth come from? I mean, it's not really a myth because, again, red meat, if it is processed, like if you're going to Macca's and getting a beef burger or a cheeseburger, then sure, that red meat is not going to be particularly ideal for your bowel health. But I think a large consumption of animal-based products, namely meat, with a lower intake of plant-based ingredients and products can negatively sway your gut microbiome as well. So like, we still want plants to be the almost overwhelming source of our nutrition, whether that's kind of whole grains or less processed grains, or whether that's fruits or vegetables, etc. That's what's going to give us the best gut health possible. Because I guess if we look at it from this angle, is meat, or is red meat or chicken or any animal product in terms of meat going to positively aid our gut health? Like a very, very neutral amount, or slightly negative even, if you were to just have animal products. Like, I don't include all animal products, because you could argue that like kefir and yogurt is beneficial because they contain probiotics. But more specifically, meat, there's going to be at best a net neutral benefit to your gut health from the literature that I've consumed. Like, maybe you could again argue that salmon is high in, if it's wild caught salmon, it's high in omega-3s, like potentially that's having an anti-inflammatory positive impact on your gut. But again, with the microbiome or strains of gut bacteria itself, like, I think, again, plants is what's going to make your bowel health as promising as possible. So if you are having beef every day, or if you are having kangaroo or any other sort of red meat, whether that's moose or bison or venison, then try and, of course, have a great plant intake alongside that, have sufficient dietary fiber, have sufficient diversity within your diet. So that way you can still get the benefits of the red meat. As Thierry said, it is very nutritious, but also not impede your bowel health at the same time. Like, you don't want, like in nutrition, I guess we never want sort of drastic extremes. Sure, there are going to be circumstances like in certain instances, but we don't want a drastic extreme of someone having 500 grams of beef mince every day and having 100 grams of plants. Like, that's not going to be ideal for your bowel health.
Yeah, I think that is such a fantastic point to make, in the sense of when we actually look at why we eat certain foods, we don't just eat every single food because it's going to majorly benefit our bowel health. right? But of course, every single food, it has its pros. And in the example of red meat, for all of those different essential micronutrients that it's providing globally as a human being, that's going to assist you in thriving. So that if you have all of those essential micronutrients, that almost indirectly is going to benefit perhaps like your recovery and your tissue growth, et cetera, from a bowel health standpoint. But then, yeah, the research actually does show that if you do have adequate amounts of plant matter and dietary fiber in your diet, and you aren't just consuming just a very high protein diet, which is very common amongst physique athletes and bodybuilding enthusiasts, and just a lot of people that are just generally seeking health and well-being, they often opt for a higher protein diet, provided that the basis of your diet is still plants. If there are any negative consequences to consuming a lot of protein and that potentially causing a little bit of gut dysbiosis, like you just said, it's basically canceled out or actually improved overall if you're consuming a plethora of plants. But yeah, that's pretty much well-rounded.
Yeah. I think final point there also would be leverage other sources of protein too. So if you are exclusively having chicken and beef, or even exclusively having beef, which there is definitely the beef and rice culture of I'm not sure which generation. I've lost count all the names of all the generations, but there are definitely, I've seen on Instagram, like trends of beef and rice, or of course the carnivore diet as well, which is so ridiculous that we won't even give it too much mention on here. I think
it's just common sense, like to have more variety. It's not inherently because red meat is bad. It's more so the case of like having variety in your diet is good.
For sure. Well, I think that one was well fleshed out. So we'll move on to the next question, which is fast versus slow deficit, which is better for maintaining muscle and well-being. So I think there's two sides to this. On one side, because I think the genuine answer is probably both can have merit. So it really depends on how much you need to lose, like what position you're starting from, how many calories you're consuming, what body fat you are, what you want to get down to, etc. So I would say the majority of the time, I would encourage a slow deficit, and it even depends on someone's habits. If this is your first ever deficit, then I'm not going to throw you into a mini cut where you're being in a 1,000 calorie deficit every day. I'd much rather do a slow deficit and build habits and ensure that you feel comfortable on this deficit, especially with it being your first experience. Whereas if someone's a experienced physique athlete and they want to lose, 10% of their body weight quite quickly, then I'm probably going to do a faster deficit and still have confidence that it will maintain their muscle and well-being, because those are obviously integral points. So, but I think if someone has to ask this question, then, and it says no, I don't know who the question asker is. We've just typed in the questions. So if someone is asking this question, I would probably go slow deficit, because I think someone would know if they had the structure and the amount that they need to lose was conducive for a faster deficit.
I personally would go somewhere in the in-between, fast, medium versus slow. I think that, if you had to pick one, probably going for at least a moderate rate of loss. But yeah, it really just depends. And it's not always just about body composition starting off, because of course your body's probably going to be a little bit more resilient to not losing muscle mass and having significantly drained energy levels if you are starting off from a heavier body weight, and perhaps in terms of like ratios of muscle mass to body fat, you have a little bit more body fat on you. But if you're going a little bit too slow, even if your body can handle it and you can withstand kind of that discomfort of being hungry, it's like psychologically, it's quite motivating if you are going into a calorie deficit to actually see the results on the scale and actually see that number going down at a decent rate. It keeps people going. And psychologically, I've always experienced in my coaching that, sometimes that can actually blunt the degree of hunger. Or even if someone's having a day where they're like, yeah, listen, I'm feeling a little bit tired today, but woo, got a new low, right? Like psychologically, it like really keeps the juices flowing. So I think there's something there to be like, you don't want to go too slow. But if we actually look at it, okay, in the case of if we want to be preserving muscle mass when we are dieting in general, you do want to be aiming for anywhere about like a 0.5 to 1% of your body weight lost on average every single week. that, of course, combined with you're sleeping adequately, you have a micronutrient rich diet, your protein is evenly distributed throughout the day and you're eating adequate protein. It would probably be helpful as well if you're providing a stimulus in the gym and you're getting some resistance training in. So all of those things aside, it is important to be aiming for anywhere between 0.5 to 1% of your body weight lost on average each week. So let's say you had a 60 kilo female, that's like 300 to 600 grams on average lost every week. You had like a 100 kilo male, right? That's like 500 to 1,000 grams.
Makes it easy for you there, yeah.
There we go. Easy math. I'm not like, when you ask someone like, how much do you weigh? And they're like, oh, I'm like 76.3. But yesterday, I was like 76.5. I'm like, okay, now we're really splitting hairs.
Yeah.
But then again, when it comes to splitting hairs, that's the thing. It can be a little bit demotivating for people if you are looking at your weekly average loss and it's only like 100 grams. And there you even have to question too. You're like, is that really weight loss or is that just like normal fluctuations with some fluid, with some food bulk? Oh, this week you were waking up a little bit earlier than last week, etc. So yeah, you want to get in and at least get the job done at a decent rate. Otherwise, mentally, people just fizzle out.
Yeah, I think you guys covered that really well in terms of, the slow versus fat. And it is very, very individual dependent. But I guess with the question as well, it's asking around maintaining muscle and well-being. And that's going to be very, very independent on the individual as well, like that well-being aspect, whether it is, maybe someone who lives a very, very busy lifestyle with, family and very busy work, maybe they can't, I guess, afford mentally to have that fast, aggressive deficit where they may be a little bit more compromised and they may not be able to, adhere to a more strict diet, and things like steps and cardio, I guess, can potentially come into the equation there as well. Maybe from a lifestyle perspective, they are more beneficial doing a slower deficit because of those other factors. Whereas someone who may not have more of those responsibilities and who is able to do all these other things like steps and cardio and adhere to a bit more of a stricter diet, maybe can potentially do a faster deficit. So I think those sorts of factors definitely come into the individual as well.
I'm glad that you pointed that out because I think more than anything, it is the well-being aspect because a lot people are under the impression that if they are going to go into a calorie deficit, that they're at like this enormous risk of potentially losing muscle mass. Like the good news is that muscle is pretty darn resilient and you have to be a bit of a fool for quite a chronic period of time for your muscle to actually waste away. You basically have to like disregard anything that you know about just like bodybuilding in general to actually have your muscle completely wilt away. Like that's a good thing, right? Because it's significantly harder to actually build muscle in the first place than it is to just maintain it. We need like significantly less training volume. You don't even need quite the same level of training intensity. No, we don't actually need to be consuming like 3+ grams of protein per kilo of body weight. Like the research has shown that, we actually probably can go toward a lower end, a 1.6 gram to 2 gram per kilo of body weight, right? And again, your muscle mass, it wants to stay on your body. Like you have to put yourself under some pretty extreme conditions, again, for a lengthy period of time where like your sleep is significantly compromised, you're not consuming adequate protein, you've forgotten what the gym even is, you're just like completely like just disregarding your health. Yeah. And you're maybe bed bound, you're not moving, then maybe your muscle mass is going to waste away. But more often than not, it's going to be there to stick around, provided that, you're doing things half decently. It's really the well-being aspect. It's like, okay, can you actually withstand that little bit of discomfort that comes with dieting? Can you have a level of self-control and a level of discipline or when it comes to food and your routine? And is this going to be sustainable and realistic for you to actually, just be a little bit energy deprived for a little bit?
Yeah. I think it also depends on how advanced someone is as well. Like the more advanced someone is, like I think there is a middle ground between someone being immobile on a hospital bed and someone who is a pro level bodybuilder. But the more advanced you are, probably the more attention to detail you'll need in terms of your training quality, training stimulus, recovery, all those variables that we've mentioned. So, but I think going back to what you said earlier, Tiara, too, is like defining what is a slow and aggressive deficit. Like I think probably 0.5% of your weight per loss per week is maybe slow-ish. But even then, like if someone is 100 kilos and they're losing half a kilo per week, like that's reasonable.
Adds up.
Yeah. I would say that's even, slow to moderate. So maybe even like 0.25 to 5, or 0.25 to zero point 0.5 would be slow. And then zero point 0.5 to 1 would be moderate. And I think 1 to 1.5% of your weight lost per week is more aggressive. But people may have very different expectations of that. Like maybe someone thinks that fast is, I don't know, 2% of your body weight lost per week, which is very aggressive indeed. But again, depends on your starting point. If someone is starting from 150 kilos and they need that weight lost for health reasons or for a surgery, then losing more rapidly is something that maybe just needs to happen, and you can afford to make it happen a bit more quickly in that initial term. So yeah, there's lots of ifs and buts and whens and hows, but ultimately that's where the magic happens of tailoring it to yourself and your circumstances and your experience level. So the lovely answer of it depends. But I think we'll move on to the next question. So this one says, how to manage post-show hunger. So I think with Damien being still within the vicinity of the post-show period, I think this would be a good one for him to start with and get his thoughts on.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And yeah, definitely still within that post-show phase. And the post-show hunger, it definitely is very, very, very real. And it is a very, very challenging space as well. And something that I'm definitely still navigating myself day to day. It is getting better and better. And people within that kind of post-show period, I can definitely resonate with you right now. And it is a challenging space, especially as a first-time competitor. And you can be told so many different things on how to manage it and what the experience is going to be like. And you can listen and read all these sorts of things. But until you're really in the thick of it, it can be a bit eye-opening and sometimes a bit confronting as well. And I've taken some strategies from even prep into this kind of post-show phase to help manage hunger and help manage, I guess, appetite. And I guess a couple of those things have been still eating fairly similar meals, I guess, from what prep has, with some flexibility as well. Like I'm very much a person who can eat pretty much the same thing all of the time and have been for many, many years now. I think I've had whey and cereal for some sort of fruit for the past 2-3 years. So that's, I guess, something that's become quite of a routine. But I think that's also important, I guess, coming from prep into that post-show phase, like keeping things fairly similar, keeping even meal timings fairly similar as well. Like it can be very, very easy to go, I've had my meal and I might just have a snack as well or something like that. Whereas if you try and keep that same sort of structure, then it doesn't allow you to, I guess, fall out of those sorts of habits that you may have built during prep. And I'm not trying to say that you have to stay in that prep mode, but I think having that sort of certain meal structure can make things a lot easier. And I've definitely found that being a benefit for sure. I think as well, allowing yourself to have some flexibility is important. Whereas, within prep, we are very, very rigid and very strict around nutrition. And once the shackles, I guess, come off into that post-show phase, it can be sometimes a bit challenging. But I think allowing yourself to have some flexibility within meals is important, because if you don't have any flexibility, then, at a time where you do get a little bit, then it can become not dangerous, but I guess people can take it the complete opposite way, where they may overindulge or may overeat because they haven't had that flexibility, or they haven't had, a meal that's, quote unquote off plan or something like that. So yeah, I think flexibility within rigidity, I think, is something that I have been striving towards. But yeah, keen to hear your guys' thoughts as well, and certain tips and tricks you may either use yourself or with clients as well.
Yeah, Jack, when you're feeling hungry post-show, how do you manage it?
I mean, I think many of the points that Damien said were, very, very good and very similar to what I do as well, where I usually eat similar foods, but more of it, because chances are your food choices in prep were quite voluminous and satiating and fibrous as well. Like you don't want to eat something like just rice and chicken and it be digested immediately and you feel like you haven't even eaten. But I think also sticking to structure and routine and remaining busy is key also. I think challenges may arise if you have time off work immediately post-show and you've got all this time in the day and nothing to do, that can be challenging from a appetite and hunger management standpoint too. A couple of other things that I would say is also, determining whether it is hunger or appetite. Like, is it physiological hunger? Is it driven by sort of the time since you last ate or having recently exercised, or is it more so appetite? And are you just looking for things to eat? Are you I don't know, browsing a menu? Are you watching someone else eat? Are you kind of stressed or in a high emotive state at that point? And sometimes even just cluing yourself in and reflecting on that can help. Like, even though it doesn't necessarily change the sensation of I want to eat, I think it allows you to pause and sit back and reflect about it and make a slightly more informed choice as to whether, okay, am I hungry because I need to nourish my body, or am I hungry because I walked past a bakery and it smelled really good? So, and feeding into that is also your food choices too. Like, you don't necessarily want to have highly stimulating or highly palatable food choices all the time. Again, the same as in prep. Like, in prep, you don't want to finish a meal and then want more of it. You want to finish a meal and be like, okay, that was satisfying, but it wasn't so spectacular that I want 12 more of this. Like, sure, by the end of prep, you will want 12 more of it purely for the energy. But again, same deal post-show, where there's a nice blend, where Damien said, of structure and routine of fairly simple, straightforward meals that are ticking nutritional boxes. That it doesn't need to taste bad, but you don't want it to taste like a Michelin star meal, ideally. But then you might sprinkle in a snack each day or a meal each day, or depending on who you are and how you're going, you may sprinkle in more of those highly palatable options to assist.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm just constantly reminding myself that, like, Tiara, you've done the tough stuff. You've demonstrated to yourself for months on end that you can do everything that you generally do anyway. And I'm not just speaking for myself, but a lot of people who just live this lifestyle day to day, year round, whether or not you call yourself a bodybuilder, whether or not you call yourself, a hobby builder, whatever it may be. But when you go through a comp prep and you are in that energy compromised state for months on end and you're training and you're posing and you're doing your cardio and all that sort of stuff, right? And you're literally like relying on your own body's energy reserves. And at times you're like, man, I feel like I'm literally running off fumes right now. I'm on like 1,400 calories, right? But if you can demonstrate to yourself and you have a stack of undeniable proof that you can do all of the things in that energy compromised state, one, reflect back on like how goddamn good you felt, whether it was just even majorly like psychologically or even physiologically too, but on those refeed days, right? Like, you're coming off the back end of 6 low days on like 125 grams of carbs, then you get your like one refeed day at like 250 or 300 grams or something. You're bouncing off the walls. You feel so effing good, but that probably still has you in a very, very slight energy deficit, or maybe just at maintenance. So if you can actually reflect back and think about how gosh darn good you felt on those days, right? And then when you are in that post-show period, you're like, wow, I'm basically having like a refeed day every day plus some, right? Like, I think it's really important to think back to that. That's amazing. But again, just remind yourself that like, I've done all of the things for a very lengthy period of time and I made it through, right? I can do this. So I think just like psychology plays an enormous role in it. But also just like to remember, guys, like, we volunteer to do this. It's supposed to be fun, right? So like trying to not, get into a mindset of the case of like shackles or on or off, but more so, like, this is my choice, right? And I just want to take care of myself. So yeah, I think that using all of those kind of strategies that you employ during a prep to help manage hunger during the prep, then being able to actually continue to apply those post-show when you are still like you still have an abundance of food, right? I think that, it really can work to your benefit. It really does just come down to your mindset. But yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that, you can certainly do to just, make sure that you're still like, okay, I still feel as though I have full control over myself and my actions around food. And, for the majority of us, right, like, we can always eat, whether we're in a calorie deficit or at maintenance or even in a surplus. Like, when you're a relatively lean individual who exercises regularly, like, food's good stuff. We kind of even I bet in your peak off season, Jack, you're like, yeah, I could eat if I really wanted to, right? Like, we generally always have it. Yeah, man, just bust out the blender.
The blender said otherwise, I think,
but
on that.
Like, Jack's talking about 3 or 4 blenders, I think, in these posts.
Food is good stuff. So I just think it's important to not get like get too emotional or react about it, and like, I know, almost kind of fear hunger in a sense. Just remember, like, it's just a feeling, right?
Yeah, I think there's a spectrum for sure of it's a feeling, and then it's like a water over stone where it does wear at you. And especially, I can understand the mindset as well of being like, I did all the hard stuff, like you said, Tierra. But then why hasn't it stopped now? Like I did the hard stuff. Like I got up on stage, like I dieted and achieved the best conditioning of my life. Like why is it still hard? Like I can understand that frustration and difficulty that competitors have because it is challenging. Like in an ideal world, like any other sport, you would play the match on game day, and then you would go out with your mates afterwards and like celebrate and eat some food, and then it would be done. Like you would then be back into training and you would have another game the following week. Whereas bodybuilding is not quite like that because you have that recovery period afterwards. So I will sort of end on one point in the sense that it does get better. Like every week is an improvement. And as a first, if this question asker is a first time competitor, sometimes there's no light at the end of the tunnel because you literally don't know. You haven't gone through it before. Whereas people who have competed more than once, like they know what to expect. They can be like, okay, I'm in week 1 or 6 here. Like by the time I get to week 3, there'll be a 75% improvement. And by the time I get to week 6, my hunger cues and appetite cues will be pretty much back to normal. Whereas if you've never gone through this before, then it certainly can be challenging because you're like, oh, is this going to happen for another 6, 10, 12 weeks or will it get better even from next week? So you just need to, like, part of it, as you mentioned, Tiara, is just kind of seeking it out and using the strategies that we've said. It's not just pure discipline. Obviously, there are the practical strategies that we mentioned and reaching out to people for support as well. And we did have a bigger post-show topic 2 episodes or a few episodes ago. So if people want to tune in for something a bit more comprehensive on post-show and around binge eating, then they can tune in on that one too.
Yeah, it's gradual, it's subtle. It's like when you're in that very first week of prep, like unless you convince yourself otherwise, you're like, oh man, I'm eating less calories. I'm just doomed. I'm just bound to be starving. It's like, all right, if you actually take a moment and step back, you're like, I'm pretty G. I'm all right. But of course, it creeps up on you. It takes time, right? When you're dieting for 6 months straight, over those weeks and over those months, gradually, you're going to be like, whoa, all right. Yeah, I could definitely eat. That meal didn't quite, hit the spot. And then when you're post-show, again, it's going to be gradual getting back up to a point where you're like, I'm good. You know what? Like that breakfast really satiated me. And my mind is not just thinking about and counting down the minutes until I can eat my lunch. So yeah, it just takes time, but you just have to stay cool, stay calm, and just be at peace with that and recognize that it all comes with the territory of the sport, right? Like you can't compare it to anything else. It is what it is, right? So it's not really fair to compare ourselves, to other athletes.
Mm. Yeah, no, even athletes maybe within the sport too, because someone, not just other sports, but other athletes within bodybuilding may have competed 10 times, or they may just, again, with bodybuilding, it's not always fair either. Like people genuinely have better and worse genetics or different protocols followed and those sorts of things. So,
but yeah, just remind yourself that, if you can do the prep and you can do generally everything that you would normally do in your bodybuilding lifestyle, eating like half the amount of food that you are now post-comp, you got this. All right. You can do it. You literally are in a much more energetic state.
It's the pep talk I needed from you guys. I appreciate it.
It's just logic, yo. All right. So what? We've got one more question?
Yeah, we'll do one more. So after post-show rebound, I gained 14 kilos. Would it be okay to clean bulk or is it better to mini cut? So definitely a challenging circumstance for certain competitors post-show where they've maybe gained more weight than what they're comfortable with. And they're often faced with that decision. And often there is a knee-jerk mental reaction to, okay, I want to lose this straight away. Like I want to get this off me, especially given the very sudden gain is often associated with disproportionate body fat distribution. So it's usually more central, which is very uncomfortable. And it's a very, very acute change from being comp level lean to suddenly looking in the mirror and not even recognizing the individual in it. So that sort of headspace can be associated with making rash decisions sometimes and making decisions which maybe aren't the most conducive with your kind of long-term health. So I would say initially, again, I would assess this on a case-by-case basis. And I don't know the starting weight of this individual or their comp weight. So they maybe have competed at 90 kilos and therefore plus 14 kilos is very different to if they were like 65 kilos and they've gained 14 kilos. So, but let's just say it's maybe a fairly rapid amount of weight gain. We can say they're back to where they started upon prep, essentially. So they're starting weight for their comp prep. And I would say to just maintain. So neither clean bulk or mini cut. Like, I think there definitely needs to be a period of maintenance initially where you can essentially recover, let your body weight settle, let your body fat distribution settle as well, and redistribute, and just get a good feel about not being in either camp of either bulking or cutting. Like, there, you are allowed to maintain and focus on other things as well. So you can focus on your training performance. You can focus on the quality of your nutrition as well. Like, if you're a female and maybe you've had a slightly irregular cycle, and you can focus on getting that back and restoring it, and allow sort of body recomposition to do its thing. And then I would personally try not to do any sort of cutting for at least 6 months after a bodybuilding competition. Like, I even try to push that out to 12 months for my competitors who are post-show, whether that means a very long time at maintenance. Maybe that the majority of that is at maintenance, but in most circumstances, there is a period of weight gain associated with that. So the questions, if this competitor came to me for a consult, like, some of the other questions that I would be asking is, okay, what was your peak off-season weight before? And then basically map out a bit of a timeline with them. Okay, what is your current body composition looking at in 3 months' time after some maintenance? Do we think we can sort of increase the top end amount of body weight? How is your training going? Like, quality of nutrition, other lifestyle variables, things outside of bodybuilding like social and stresses, and basically go from there.
And rest assured that body recomposition, it is absolutely a thing. You can definitely build muscle mass and lose body fat simultaneously. And I think even in this case, focusing on things other than just scale weight, because often in this sport, people, like you said, Jack, they get into that mindset of like, oh yeah, it needs to be one or the other. God forbid I ever just maintain who I am. I always need to be shrinking or growing. But we have to remember that, like, losing weight, gaining weight, that in itself, it's a freaking stressor on the body, right? So sometimes you just need to be, but sometimes people feel as though, oh, I'm just like sitting like in this limbo, in this plateau, if my body weight's just like fluctuating within a certain range. But it's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. So perhaps there, apart from just looking at things like progress photos and scale weight, I think actually in this case, maybe taking some girth measurements could be pretty beneficial, because if someone is recomping, then if it's like, okay, every 2 weeks, take a waist measurement, take a hip measurement, take a chest measurement, take a thigh measurement, whatever it may be, so that you can actually see, oh, like the actual circumference of these certain body parts, that's actually changing, even though my body weight is staying fairly stagnant. Yeah, but I think it's important to, not, swing the pendulum either side, even though for some people it can be tempting, and it's very familiar as well. They're like, oh, well, a few weeks ago, I was dieting and, eating less, dropping calories, that seemed to do and work the trick. But long-term, clearly that person just is not in the right headspace to do that. And again, like, their body's clearly very stressed out. You just need to, really let everything settle.
Yeah. I even think as well, like you mentioned, Jack, around the, I guess I'm within this phase now. I can kind of touch on, I guess, a couple of points, especially from the fat distribution or the redistribution phase. I guess, like, it's definitely something that I'm working through. Sometimes it is a bit challenging, and I've reached out to you about it, Jack, as well, in terms of putting on weight fairly quickly within this kind of phase, which is the goal, to kind of get out of that prep hole, as I guess you could say, where you are very, very lean, and you need to put some body fat back on to restore hormone function and to feel like a human again, and start to get those sorts of things back in place. And it is a challenging phase to kind of go through, because you were just stage lean, your veins were popping out, you had cuts everywhere, and all of a sudden you're putting on a few extra kilos and it's just gone straight to your gut, and you've gone, what's going on here? Like, where are the abs gone? So, and it is a really, really challenging phase, because it's like, okay, well, I put on all this weight, like, do I then go back to what I was looking like before, and like, should I just cut straight away because all of this weight's gone straight to whatever, your midsection or wherever you hold most of your body fat? And it can be a bit of a challenging thing mentally to kind of deal with. And I can definitely understand where people can start to fall into that, I guess, rebound of cutting and bulking post show. And yeah, it's definitely a challenging space, but I think that's where it's really, really important to get the support that you need, whether it is with your coach or having that kind of discussions around what sorts of phase you should be in, to get that right sort of advice to make the right decision moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as you mentioned, and as Tiara mentioned, you just don't want to pendulum swing the other way, which, just to reinforce it, is why we probably wouldn't recommend a cut. I think with body weight stabilizing, you may see a reduction anyway in body weight, because I think, let's say you gain 14 kilos in 2 weeks, like obviously that's not all true body weight. So if you just have consistency afterwards, like there will be some body weight reduction, but we just don't want to, again, pendulum swing the other way, reinforce all those cues that led up to the period of overeating again, and have that just continually be a cycle, because that's what happens when someone does go back into a deficit. They get all those triggers that caused the overeating in the first place, and then they diet it off again, and then they regain it, they diet it off, etc., which is not great for stability in any sense of the word, like psychologically or physiologically. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up that question, and we'll head into our final question of every episode, which says, is essentially something that we learned this week. So I'm happy to kick things off myself. We've had a decent amount of rain lately, and I have noticed that, or just reminded of how damn quickly grass grows. And yeah, the lovely aspect of being a homeowner is you need to mow your own grass or pay someone to do it. So, but in my sense, or my case, it's worked out quite well. Like the grass was, basically beyond, I thought, saving. In terms of how
it's gone.
It was long gone, partially attributed to two border collies who run on it and do other things on it as well. So, but yeah, fortunately it bounced
Choose
back.
sticks, of course.
Yeah,
no number twos. No, you need them. It's good fertilizer.
Maybe a little too high concentration of nitrogen for the soil, or for the grass. Yeah, it's good to see it bounce back, as well as like the other aspects of where I live. It's nice to see how quickly things bounce back with even just a few days of rain, and how green everything looks. It's always really nice, and a time of year that I enjoy with a bit of sporadic rain. I don't like it raining for 2 weeks in a row and it being cold at the same time, like in the UK. But over here in Australia, like the occasional thunderstorm and then sunny days is quite nice. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That great contrast between the white clouds, the blue sky, the green grass, green trees.
What did you learn though, Damien?
I've actually, since prep, there was a time in prep where, one particular time before one of the shows where I was staying in one of the Airbnbs and there was tea there. And I thought, I've always, I guess, been partial to a cup of tea here or there, but never really indulged in it, and had a cup of tea and thought, this is actually quite nice. I might start to, I guess, get a bit more involved in that, and doing a bit of research, I guess, lately, and I've been drinking a little bit more tea, but mainly, I guess, the herbal teas, and actually found that herbal tea doesn't actually contain like the leaves or the tea leaves or the leaf buds from that you would usually get from, I guess, normal kind of teas, but it's more so, I guess, like extracts from different sorts of dried fruits or flowers, that sort of thing. And I guess it's not necessarily the actual tea leaves or tea buds. And I guess I thought something was a bit fascinating around, I guess, that sort of space. And I've been a bit more partial to exploring my tea vocabulary and trying to have a few different more herbal teas. So yeah, watch out, Big Tea. I'm definitely on the space for some new ones. So if anyone's got any recommendations, please reach out.
Gosh dang, the more you know.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Is there potentially your guide to tea coming to TBD?
On the horizon. Watch this space.
Hey, hit up the Canva. That's the next TBD post. It's a TBD tea post.
First crumpets and then tea. So what's next? The sky's the limit.
Yeah. What about you, Tio?
Oh, gosh. Well, this past week, I learned that I have the potential to be the biggest prankster on Halloween. Because Halloween in Australia, it's interesting. Like, where I grew up in Canada and the US, like, Halloween, it's a thing, right? Like, at school, everyone gets dressed up. We used to have a parade. You get off school early on Halloween and everyone goes trick-or-treating. But here in Australia, it's a little bit hit and miss. And I've certainly come to just learn that over my past number of years living in this country. But there's some places that get amongst it, other places that don't. But where I live now, it's on this really family-friendly street. And a few houses around me, they put up the Halloween decorations. Kids were out trick-or-treating. But I was basically like, I don't know, but maybe like the Grinch version of Halloween. Like, I didn't buy any, 2-cent pumpkins from the Cabbage Patch and carve them and put some little candles in them in front of my house. Like my house was like, no, don't come here. Lights are off. I don't have any candy. But, kids, still knocking on my door, like, trick or treat, smell my feet, give me something good to eat. I don't know. I was kind of like, well, in my eyes, this is a treat, but you're probably thinking I'm going to play a massive trick on you because, yeah, I don't have candy in the house, but what do I have an abundance of?
Sardines, yes.
I have so many sardines. I have just a fridge full of really random discount produce, like a whole bunch of 9-cent per kilo zucchinis. So I was like, you know what? Like, depends at what angle you look at it, but maybe I'm helping these kids out. Maybe this is really going to be a treat for them and, like trying to balance out the cavities. So, yeah, that's just what I learned, that I have the full potential to not be the Grinch, but, provide kids with a wonderful treat of sardines and zucchinis if I so would like wish to do so on Halloween.
I'm sure they'd be very thankful.
I'd be thankful, dude. If I rocked up to someone's house and they had like a basket full of sardines, I was like, wow, my dreams just came true.
Yeah, I recently tried olive oil dark chocolate, so I could be giving out some of that on Halloween as well.
Also depends how generous you are too. I'm like, well,
it's not cheap.
These are $1 a can, You must be a really friendly kid.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much wraps up this episode. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. As per usual, if you are interested in learning more about our coaching style or who we are, you can follow us on Instagram. And you can also follow the Bodybuilding Dietitians and our Team TBD Instagram page too. So all of those links are down below. If you're also interested in reaching out for any coaching or you're just interested in what we offer and our pricing, you can head over to our website. Again, the link is down below, or just search the Bodybuilding Dietitians and you can reach out to us. We'll be in contact with you very quickly and can flesh out our pricing, our services, and book a discovery call as well. So thanks to everyone again for tuning in, and we'll catch everyone next week.